Ancient civilizations across the globe built pyramids with the same celestial precision, a fact that defies our understanding of an isolated past. This video uncovers the evidence for a prehistoric global network of cities that shared advanced knowledge, challenging the very timeline of human history. By the end, you will see a new map of the ancient world, one connected by a web of collaboration we are only beginning to understand. How did cultures separated by oceans design identical structures aligned to the stars? And what happened to this lost web of knowledge? What does this forgotten chapter of shared ingenuity tell us about our own potential for connection? A lone sailor on a vast, dark ocean looks up, not to random points of light, but to a familiar map painted across the heavens. This ability to navigate by the stars was not a unique discovery. It echoes across the globe, from the Polynesian voyagers who settled the Pacific to the Phoenician traders of the Mediterranean. How could such specific, complex knowledge emerge independently in cultures separated by impassable mountains and endless seas? This is the central, captivating mystery that forms the foundation of our entire exploration. Historians and archaeologists first began piecing together a global puzzle, noticing that the same sophisticated concepts appeared in civilizations that, according to our textbooks, never met. We see pyramids aligned with celestial precision in both the deserts of Egypt and the jungles of Central America. We find complex calendars tracking planetary cycles with stunning accuracy in Mesopotamia and Mesoamerica. The academic world has long been divided on how to explain this. One school of thought champions the idea of parallel evolution, suggesting that humanity, facing similar challenges, simply arrived at the same brilliant solutions independently. It is a testament to the universal ingenuity of the human mind. Yet another perspective points to the startling similarities in design, in astronomical alignment, and in symbolic meaning, arguing that these are not mere coincidences but clues. They propose the possibility of contact, of a diffusion of knowledge that somehow crisscrossed the ancient world. The implications of this second idea are staggering. It suggests a forgotten chapter in human history, where a web of exchange connected distant shores, where ideas and blueprints traveled across continents. This is not just about shared technology, but about a shared vision of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. If true, our understanding of ancient isolation shatters, replaced by a map of a world far more connected than we ever dreamed. The most compelling evidence for this connection is etched in stone, waiting in the silent, monumental ruins of the past. These pyramids rise from the deserts of Egypt and the highlands of Mexico as if built from the same forgotten blueprint. Their structural kinship is the first monumental clue in our global mystery. We are not merely looking at piles of stone, but at complex machines of celestial observation. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, is aligned to the cardinal points with an accuracy of less than 1/15 of a single degree. This is not the work of primitive guesswork. It requires a profound understanding of geometry and the Earth's rotation, a knowledge that, as researchers like Dr. John Anthony West argued, seems to appear fully formed in the historical record. The same genius is mirrored at Teotihuacan in Mexico. The Pyramid of the Sun there is precisely aligned with the setting sun on specific days of the year, while the larger city layout mirrors the arrangement of stars in our solar system. This pattern repeats across the world. Mayan pyramids, like the one at Chichen Itza, are designed so that during the equinoxes, the play of light and shadow creates the illusion of a serpent slithering down the steps, a direct communication between the earth and the heavens. How could cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years develop not just the same architectural form, but the same obsession with encoding cosmic cycles into their very foundations? The answer seems etched into the stone itself, in the specific angles and alignments they chose. This shared architectural language points to something far deeper than independent invention. It suggests a common source, a foundational knowledge of the universe that was somehow shared across the globe. The stones themselves whisper of a connection, a network of ideas that transcended the vast, empty spaces on our maps. The stones themselves hold another, even more baffling secret. Look closely at the walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, where massive blocks weighing dozens of tons are locked together with seams so tight you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. This same impossible perfection appears in the foundations of ancient Japanese shrines and deep within the oldest Egyptian temples. This is not simple stacking. It is polygonal masonry, a lost art of engineering where irregularly shaped stones are carved to fit their neighbors with microscopic precision, all without a single drop of mortar. The result is a structure that moves and breathes as one, a puzzle of stone so resilient it has withstood centuries of earthquakes that would reduce modern buildings to rubble. Master stonemasons who study these walls today express a kind of reverent awe, stating that replicating this work would be a monumental challenge even with our advanced machinery and laser-guided tools. The logistics are staggering. How do you quarry a 200-ton stone, transport it across miles of rugged terrain, and then hoist it into place, all while carving its surface to interlock perfectly with a dozen other uniquely shaped blocks? Local legends often speak of a different method, whispering of lost knowledge that allowed the ancients to soften stone or use sound, a form of acoustic levitation, to make the massive blocks weightless. While these stories are part of oral tradition, they point to a universal recognition that what was achieved seems to defy conventional explanation. Consider the colossal stones at Baalbek in Lebanon, where a foundation block estimated to weigh over 1,000 tons rests in place, or the imposing fortress of Ollantaytambo in Peru, where giant rose stones were somehow hauled up a steep mountainside. The question this global pattern forces us to ask is profound. Was this simply the best possible way to build with stone, discovered independently by every culture that reached a certain level of sophistication? Or does this shared, almost supernatural mastery of megalithic construction point to a transferred technology, a set of instructions that traveled across the world? The evidence in the stonework suggests a network, a conversation between master builders who understood the earth in a way we are still struggling to comprehend. And if they could share the secrets of stone, what else did they know? That shared understanding of stone speaks a language of geometry and physics, but their conversation with the cosmos was even more direct. An ancient priest atop the pyramid of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza and another at a temple in Angkor Wat could have both tracked the precise, cyclical path of Venus across the sky, using nearly identical calculations. This is not just a shared fascination with the stars, it is a shared advanced science. Their monuments were not merely buildings, they were colossal calendars and astronomical observatories. The stones of Stonehenge frame the sunrise on the summer solstice, while the Great Sphinx at Giza gazes directly at the constellation Leo on that same significant day. The layout of the city of Teotihuacan in Mexico is famously said to mirror the spacing of planets in our solar system. These are not random observations, they are meticulously encoded scientific data. This celestial literacy required a deep, generational study of the heavens, tracking cycles that span decades or even centuries. The Mayan long count calendar, for instance, calculated cosmic cycles with such astonishing accuracy that it remains a subject of study for modern astronomers. Similarly, the ancient Vedic Yuga system from India describes vast cycles of time that correspond to astronomical precession, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis. How could cultures separated by continents and oceans develop such parallel, complex systems for understanding time and the movement of celestial bodies? The astronomer Carl Sagan often spoke of the universal human drive to comprehend the cosmos, but the data here suggests something more specific than a shared drive. It implies a shared library of knowledge, a foundational understanding of celestial mechanics that was observed, recorded, and built into the very fabric of their cities. This universal language of the stars points to a network where such precise data was not just independently discovered, but potentially exchanged. To truly decode how this communication might have worked, we must turn from the grand alignments of their monuments to the intimate details they left behind in the form of symbols and scripts. A serpent devouring its own tail is an image that appears on ancient Egyptian papyri, etched into Nordic runestones and woven into the sacred art of the Aztecs. This symbol, known as the Ouroboros, universally represents the cyclical nature of existence, the endless loop of time, death, and rebirth. It is far from an isolated case. From the sprawling branches of the Norse world tree Yggdrasil to the Mesopotamian tree of life, the same powerful archetypes emerge across continents. This is not a gallery of random artistic choices, but a collection of recurring chapters from what appears to be the same primordial story. Symbologists who map these patterns suggest we are looking at a shared mythological framework, a vocabulary of symbols that conveyed complex ideas about cosmic order and spiritual beliefs. The feathered serpent is one of the most compelling examples. In ancient Mexico, he was known as Quetzalcoatl, the bringer of knowledge and civilization. Journey across the Pacific to Southeast Asia, and you encounter the Naga, powerful serpentine deities associated with wisdom, water, and the underworld. The parallels are too specific, too deeply woven into the cultural fabric, to be dismissed as simple coincidence. These symbols functioned as a kind of conceptual shorthand, a way to communicate profound truths about the nature of reality, the movement of the heavens, and the journey of the soul. When a culture in the Indus Valley and another in the Andes both depict a spiral, it often carries the same meaning, a representation of the universe's expansion and the soul's journey. This points to something far more significant than parallel thought. It suggests a common origin, a foundational set of ideas that was carried, exchanged, and adapted across the ancient world. Could these recurring motifs have been a lingua franca, a silent, symbolic language understood by initiates and scholars from the Mediterranean to the Americas? This symbolic unity reinforces the idea of a connected ancient world, a network where knowledge was not just about engineering or astronomy, but about the fundamental principles of existence itself. And if they shared a common language of symbols, it stands to reason they would also share the universal language of mathematics. The same mathematical constants that structure our universe appear in temples separated by continents and centuries. An architect in ancient India laying out a mandala would have used the golden ratio, a precise proportion of roughly 1.618 to 1, to create a sense of perfect harmony. This exact same ratio defines the proportions of the Parthenon in Greece and is encoded into the very dimensions of the Great Pyramid at Giza. This is not a coincidence, it is a pattern. The number pi, the constant that defines the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter, is found in the Great Pyramid's base perimeter to height ratio. Across the ocean, the same sophisticated geometry appears in the layout of Teotihuacan and in the intricate carvings of Angkor Wat. These cultures were not just using math for practical construction, they were weaving it into the sacred fabric of their world. As mathematician Keith Critchlow has highlighted, these constants were seen as the language of the cosmos, a way to build structures that resonated with the fundamental order of reality. This is sacred geometry, the belief that certain shapes and ratios hold spiritual power and reflect the architecture of creation itself. We see it in the perfect spirals of shells that follow the Fibonacci sequence, a series of numbers that approaches the golden ratio, and we see it mirrored in the design of temples and altars. The King's Chamber inside the Great Pyramid is a perfect example, its dimensions forming a 2x1 rectangle that embodies principles of resonance and proportion known to create a specific, harmonious atmosphere. This widespread use of Pythagorean triples, sets of 3 whole numbers that perfectly define a right triangle, in structures from Mesoamerican ball courts to Vedic fire altars, points to a shared understanding that goes beyond mere measurement. How could such precise and abstract mathematical knowledge be so universally applied by cultures that supposedly never met? The presence of pi and phi in monuments from the Americas to Asia suggests these were not independent discoveries, but pieces of a shared intellectual heritage. This was about encoding the hidden laws of the universe into stone, creating a physical echo of cosmic order. If these mathematical blueprints were indeed shared, they must have traveled along the same pathways as people and goods, along the ancient trade routes that connected the world. A reed boat from Mesopotamia, built from bundles of papyrus, seems a fragile craft to challenge the open ocean. Yet vessels like these, along with the sophisticated outrigger canoes of the Polynesians, were not just coastal ferries. They were oceanic explorers, capable of voyages that would have connected continents long before the age of European exploration. The prevailing narrative of an isolated ancient world begins to crack when we seriously assess the maritime capabilities of these early cultures. The Polynesians, for instance, were the undisputed masters of the Pacific. They navigated thousands of miles of open water by reading a living map, the stars, the swell of the waves, the flight patterns of birds, and the composition of clouds on the horizon. They possessed a celestial literacy so profound they could find specks of land in an ocean covering nearly a third of the planet. Their journeys were not accidental drifts, but intentional, round-trip voyages of discovery and settlement. This was not an isolated phenomenon. Maritime historians like Gavin Menzies have put forward theories, supported by cartographic and archaeological evidence, suggesting that other seafaring peoples undertook similar epic journeys. The Phoenicians, legendary traders of the Mediterranean, are believed by some to have circumnavigated Africa, a feat of staggering endurance. There are even compelling, though debated, claims of Chinese treasure fleets under Admiral Zheng He reaching the coasts of the Americas decades before Columbus. The evidence is not merely speculative, it is written in the very flora of the ancient world. The sweet potato, a crop native to South America, was found across Polynesia long before European contact. How did it get there? The most logical explanation is that someone carried it across the Pacific, a living testament to a transoceanic voyage. Similarly, the sudden appearance of certain artistic motifs, like jade working techniques that echo styles from ancient China in Olmec heartlands of Mexico, hints at cultural exchanges that our textbooks have long overlooked. These ancient mariners understood the ocean's hidden pathways, the great circular currents that could carry a vessel across vast distances. If they could transport plants and art styles, they could certainly transport ideas, the architectural blueprints for a pyramid, the mathematical formula for pi, the astronomical charts tracking the precession of the equinoxes. The ocean was not a barrier, it was a highway, and if these highways were active, we should be able to find the ports they connected, the twin cities that shared this advanced knowledge. The Avenue of the Dead stretches for miles through the heart of Teotihuacan, a vast ceremonial corridor pointing directly toward the Pyramid of the Moon. Half a world away, the Giza Plateau in Egypt presents a similar, breathtaking alignment, with its three great pyramids arranged in a pattern that is anything but random. Placing the layouts of these two cities side by side reveals a connection that goes far beyond superficial resemblance. Both were meticulously planned urban centers, built with a grid system that oriented their most sacred structures to the cosmos. The main pyramids at Giza are aligned with the belt of the constellation Orion, a celestial map made in stone. In Teotihuacan, the entire city is a scale model of our solar system, with the pyramids and temples positioned to mirror the relative distances of the planets from the Sun. This was not just city planning, it was cosmology in architecture, a deliberate act of creating a sacred landscape that mirrored the heavens. The scale of construction in both locations speaks to a society of immense organization and shared purpose. Thousands of individuals would have been required to quarry, transport, and position the millions of tons of stone. At Giza, the workforce was housed and fed in a dedicated workers' village, a testament to a highly structured social order. Teotihuacan, at its peak, was one of the largest cities in the ancient world, housing a diverse population that must have been coordinated with incredible precision. This level of societal coordination hints at a shared vision so powerful it could mobilize entire civilizations. Furthermore, both cities demonstrate advanced engineering in their water management, with intricate systems of canals and drains designed to control and sanctify water, the essential element of life. The spiritual purpose of these cities is undeniable. The pyramids were not just tombs or temples, they were conceived as portals, immense stairways connecting the earthly realm with the celestial one. This shared vision of the city as a microcosm of the cosmos, with architecture serving as a bridge between humanity and the stars, is too specific, too profound to be mere coincidence. It suggests a possible exchange of a core philosophical blueprint, a master plan for building a sacred city. If Teotihuacan and Giza represent one such paired connection, what other distant cities might reveal a similar shared language of design, perhaps in the ancient cultures of the East? The sprawling grid of Mohenjo-Daro's streets feels almost modern, a testament to a civilization that had perfected urban planning over 4,000 years ago. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the city of Caral in Peru was being built with a strikingly similar vision. These two urban centers, separated by vast oceans, both exhibit a level of civil engineering that seems to defy their chronological placement in history. They were constructed with precise, right-angled street layouts and featured sophisticated, city-wide drainage systems that channeled wastewater away from residential areas. This was not haphazard development, it was the result of a master plan, a conscious design for healthy, organized communal living. Perhaps the most telling feature they shared was a notable absence: the lack of any obvious defensive walls or fortifications. While other ancient cities were defined by their citadels and ramparts, Mohenjo-Daro and Caral present a different model, one that appears to have prioritized knowledge, trade, and communal well-being over military might. Urban historians point to their standardized brick sizes, an innovation that suggests a system of weights, measures, and a coordinated, large-scale construction industry. Both cities featured large, centralized granaries, indicating a sophisticated approach to food storage and distribution that could sustain a large, stable population. They also contained large, open plaza spaces and auditorium-like structures, which researchers suggest may have been used for public gatherings, ceremonies, or perhaps even collective learning, a place where knowledge was shared among the community. Their agricultural practices were equally advanced, relying on intricate understanding of river flood cycles and irrigation to cultivate crops in a sustainable manner. The parallels are too fundamental, too deeply embedded in the very fabric of these cities to be dismissed. It is as if both cultures were working from the same foundational blueprint for civilization itself, a template that valued scientific advancement, public health, and social harmony. Could this model of the peaceful, knowledge-focused city have been a concept that traveled across the ancient world? This shared emphasis on communal living and resource management required one thing above all else: a mastery of the most vital resource, water. The lifeblood of these ancient cities flowed not through streets, but through hidden channels of water. From the rose-red cliffs of Petra in Jordan to the windswept highlands of Tiwanaku in Bolivia, we find the same mastery over this essential resource. These were not simple wells, but complex hydraulic networks that defy our assumptions about ancient technology. At Petra, engineers carved intricate channels and dams directly into the canyon walls, creating a system that captured seasonal floodwaters and stored them in vast reservoirs, turning a desert city into a lush oasis. In South America, Tiwanaku's builders constructed a monumental moat and a series of underground drains that regulated water levels with stunning precision, preventing flooding during heavy rains and preserving the structural integrity of their temples. The purpose of this water management was multifaceted. It provided drinking water and supported agriculture, of course, but it also served profound ceremonial and even climatic functions. The fountains and reflecting pools of Roman bathhouses and Indian stepwells were not just for utility. They created microclimates, cooling the air and providing a serene, spiritually charged atmosphere. Modern hydraulic engineers who study these systems express a deep respect for their ingenuity. They point to the consistent, gentle slope of gravity-fed aqueducts that moved water for miles without pumps, to sophisticated sand filtration beds that purified water before it reached the populace, and to clever stormwater management that directed torrential rain away from city centers. This was a universal understanding of hydrology. Consider the Qanat system of ancient Persia, a brilliant method for tapping underground aquifers in arid regions. A mother well was dug deep into a water-bearing layer at the base of a mountain, and then a series of gently sloping access tunnels were carved outward, allowing gravity to bring the water to the surface many miles away. Astonishingly, the same exact technology appears in the deserts of Peru and Chile, where they are known as puquios. How could two cultures separated by an ocean develop the same highly specific and complex solution to water scarcity? This was not a simple idea that could be stumbled upon by accident. It required a deep, transferable knowledge of geology, physics, and construction. The ability to make a city flourish in the desert was perhaps the most valuable skill an ancient civilization could possess, a form of power that would have been worth sharing across continents. This technical know-how could not have traveled through the air. It must have moved with the people who carried it, along the same routes used for trading precious stones, metals, and spices. A caravan does not just carry silk and spices, it carries the blueprint for a new way of thinking. The ancient Silk Road was far more than a commercial artery. It was a living, breathing network of knowledge, the internet of its time. For centuries, caravans of camels and horses moved between the great empires of China and Rome, their saddlebags laden with luxuries, but their true cargo was often intangible. Alongside bolts of silk and sacks of pepper traveled skilled artisans, scholarly manuscripts, and revolutionary ideas. This exchange was not limited to the dusty trails of Central Asia. Maritime silk routes connected the ports of Southeast Asia with India, the Arabian Peninsula, and the east coast of Africa, while trans-Saharan trade routes linked the empires of West Africa with the Mediterranean world. In bustling, cosmopolitan hubs like Palmyra in Syria or Taxila in modern-day Pakistan, merchants and scholars from distant cultures would meet. They were melting pots where a Greek astronomer could debate with an Indian mathematician, and a Chinese alchemist could share techniques with a Persian glassmaker. Economic historians note that these cities thrived on this cross-pollination of ideas. The trade in luxury goods often paved the way for the transfer of foundational technologies. The secret of silk production itself was a closely guarded state secret in China for centuries, yet it eventually traveled west. Similarly, advanced methods for working iron and steel, developed in India, spread along these routes, revolutionizing tools and warfare across the ancient world. The intricate art of glassmaking, perfected in Mesopotamia and Egypt, found its way to new markets, carrying with it the chemical knowledge required for its creation. Even agricultural techniques and new crop species moved with the merchants. The spread of citrus fruits from Southeast Asia into the Mediterranean, or certain varieties of cotton and rice, can be traced along these ancient highways. This was a system powered by nomadic groups who knew the land and merchant guilds that financed the journeys. They did not just disseminate goods, they disseminated the architectural styles for caravanserais, the mathematical concepts for accounting and navigation, and the astronomical charts necessary for crossing deserts and seas. The very interconnectedness of these routes meant that knowledge flowed as freely as commerce, with each trading post acting as a node in a global brain. But this raises a deeper question. If the blueprints for pyramids and the formulas for pi could travel, what about the philosophical and spiritual ideas that gave them meaning? The technologies themselves were rooted in a specific vision of the cosmos, a shared understanding of reality that seems to have been just as mobile as any merchant's wares. A shaman in the frozen expanses of Siberia might speak of a great tree, its roots delving into the underworld and its branches supporting the heavens. A Norse skald would recite the very same image, calling it Yggdrasil, the world ash, and in the humid jungles of Mesoamerica, the ceiba tree was revered as the sacred axis connecting all three realms of existence. This is the axis mundi, the world pillar, a concept so universal it forms the bedrock of countless ancient cosmologies. Comparative mythologist Joseph Campbell described these recurring symbols as archetypes, fundamental patterns of the human psyche that emerge independently across time and space. This shared vision of a cosmic center, a central pole around which the universe literally turned, was not just a story, it was a blueprint for civilization. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia were not mere temples, they were artificial mountains, stairways to the gods that physically represented this world axis. Similarly, the Great Pyramids of Egypt and the Americas were more than tombs. They were symbolic conduits, places where the earthly and the divine could meet. Their very shape, pointing directly to the zenith, made them a permanent, unmoving center in a turning world. This idea was given physical form in the breathtaking design of Borobudur in Indonesia, a massive temple complex built as a three-dimensional mandala. Pilgrims would walk its ascending terraces, a symbolic journey from the worldly realm at the base through the various levels of spiritual consciousness, finally reaching enlightenment at the central, highest stupa, the axis of the universe. The alignment of these structures was always intentional. They were frequently oriented to the pole star, the one fixed point in the revolving night sky, or built to mirror the form of a nearby sacred mountain. This was the ultimate act of bringing cosmic order down to Earth, creating a sacred center where chaos was banished and harmony prevailed. If cultures separated by entire continents shared this profound understanding of the universe's structure, is it any wonder they also shared the architectural and astronomical principles needed to build it? A unified vision of reality would naturally lead to a unified pursuit of the knowledge required to manifest it. This shared cosmology provided the philosophical fuel, but the engine of this exchange was powered by something far more tangible: the mastery of Earth's hidden treasures, a knowledge written in fire and metal. A master artisan in ancient Peru carefully pours molten gold into a clay mold, creating a funerary mask of breathtaking detail. Half a world away, a craftsman in the Indus Valley uses the exact same method, the lost wax process, to cast a bronze statue of a dancer. This is not a coincidence of artistry, it is a technological echo. Advanced metallurgy represents one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for a shared pool of ancient knowledge. To transform rock into metal requires more than fire. It demands a sophisticated understanding of chemistry, temperature control, and material science. Cultures separated by oceans independently discovered how to smelt copper, but the story becomes far more intriguing when we look at the alloys they created. The development of bronze, a mixture of copper and tin, was a revolutionary leap. It required not only finding and mining these specific ores, but also the precise knowledge of proportions and the furnace technology to achieve temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius. This knowledge appeared in Mesopotamia, in the Yellow River Valley of China, and in the Andes, seemingly in concert. Even more astonishing is the case of platinum, a metal with an exceptionally high melting point. Pre-Columbian cultures in South America developed a method of sintering, combining platinum dust with gold, and then heating it in a way that created a durable, workable alloy, a feat European metallurgists would not achieve for centuries. How could such specific, complex chemical processes emerge independently in isolated pockets of the world? The artifacts they left behind whisper of a possible exchange. Consider the Iron Pillar of Delhi, a massive column forged over 1,500 years ago. It stands today without a trace of rust, protected by a thin, protective film that formed from its unique phosphorus-rich composition. In South America, metalsmiths created objects from tumbaga, a gold and copper alloy that they then treated with acidic plant juices, a process called depletion gilding, which dissolved the copper from the surface, leaving a pure, dazzling layer of gold. These were not accidental discoveries, they were repeatable, sophisticated techniques. The bronze drums of Southeast Asia, cast with intricate geometric patterns and iconic imagery, required a mastery of large-scale casting that rivals the famous bronze work of Mycenaean Greece. Metallurgists who analyze these objects note the incredible skill needed to achieve such consistent results without modern laboratory equipment or precise measuring devices. This points to a deeply empirical yet systematically gathered body of knowledge. It suggests that the recipes for these alloys, the blueprints for furnace designs, and the techniques for metalworking may have been as valuable a trade commodity as the finished objects or raw ores themselves. If merchants carried tin from Afghanistan to the Mediterranean, is it not plausible they also carried the instructions for its use? This shared metallurgical genius reveals a world where the mastery of Earth's hidden treasures was a universal pursuit, a language of fire and chemistry that seems to have been spoken from continent to continent. Deep within the hypogeum of Malta, a single sustained note can transform the entire chamber. The sound swirls and amplifies, creating frequencies that seem to vibrate not just through the stone, but through the very body of anyone standing inside. This is not an accidental feature of the architecture, it is a design. The same precise acoustic phenomenon is found in the so-called King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, where the granite walls resonate at a specific, low frequency, and in the vast ball courts of the ancient Maya, where a whisper from one end can be heard clearly at the other. Acoustic archaeologists who study these sites describe them as giant stone instruments. They were engineered with a sophisticated understanding of resonance, the natural tendency of a structure to vibrate most strongly at a particular pitch. The builders were not merely stacking rocks, they were tuning them. At Chavin de Huanta in Peru, a complex network of underground galleries and ducts was designed to channel sound. When a conch shell trumpet, known as a pututu, was blown in one corridor, its deep, bellowing tone would travel through these stone passageways, emerging in different chambers as if the temple itself were speaking. The psychological and physiological effects of such sound are profound. Certain resonant frequencies have been shown to alter brainwave patterns, potentially inducing states of deep relaxation or heightened awareness. This suggests that these spaces were not just for gathering, but for transformation. The architecture was a tool for shaping human consciousness, using the physical properties of sound to facilitate spiritual experiences. Why would cultures separated by oceans and millennia all discover the same intricate relationship between sound, stone, and spirit? The mathematical principles of resonance are universal, but the conscious application of those principles to build structures with specific sonic properties points to more than independent discovery. It suggests a shared, experimental knowledge of the physics of vibration, a science that understood sound as a tangible force that could be harnessed. This unified pursuit of acoustic mastery reveals a world where science and spirituality were not separate disciplines, but two sides of the same coin, a theme that finds its ultimate expression in their other great intellectual achievement, the tracking of time itself. The Mayan day keeper and the Vedic astronomer, separated by an ocean, both tracked a cycle so vast it stretched across 26,000 years. This was the precession of the equinoxes, the slow, majestic wobble of the Earth's axis that gradually shifts the backdrop of the stars against which the sun rises. To identify this cycle requires more than a lifetime of observation. It demands a tradition of meticulous record-keeping passed down through countless generations. The fact that both cultures not only knew of this great year but built its rhythm into their calendars is one of history's most profound mysteries. Their systems for marking time were not simple almanacs for planting crops. They were sophisticated machines of the mind, designed to synchronize human activity with the grand, ticking clock of the cosmos. The Mayan long count calendar is a masterpiece of cyclical time, composed of interlocking wheels that track days, 20-day periods, years, and much larger cycles. It calculated the solar year to be more accurate than the Gregorian calendar used in Europe centuries later. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, Babylonian astronomers developed a lunisolar calendar that ingeniously reconciled the shorter lunar month with the longer solar year by inserting an extra month, an intercalary month, at precise intervals. This same solution, this clever patch to keep the lunar and solar cycles in harmony, was independently developed by the ancient Chinese and the Greeks. The Egyptian calendar, anchored by the Sothic cycle, relied on the heliacal rising of the star Sirius, an event that heralded the annual flooding of the Nile. Their civil year of exactly 365 days was a radical simplification of celestial complexity, yet it served as a stable framework for over 3 millennia. Calendar historians point out that these systems all required a deep, generational commitment to observation. They needed a dedicated class of scribes and astronomers who would nightly chart the heavens and daily maintain the records, creating a living database that spanned centuries. The similarities in their methods are too striking to ignore. The use of base 60 mathematics in both the Babylonian and Mayan systems for subdividing time, the shared concept of a world age that ends and renews, the precise tracking of Venus as both a morning and evening star, all these point to a staggering level of celestial literacy. How could cultures with no apparent contact develop such parallel, complex tools for understanding time itself? The most compelling explanation is not independent genius, though that was certainly present, but the existence of a network where core astronomical data, the raw observations of planetary movements and stellar cycles, was exchanged and refined. These calendars were far more than practical tools. They were philosophical statements about the nature of reality. They encoded a belief in cyclical time, in vast epochs of creation and dissolution, and in the direct connection between the heavens and human destiny. The synchronization of their cosmic clocks suggests a synchronization of thought, a shared pursuit to decode the universe's greatest secret, the nature of time. This grand project of mapping eternity required more than just shared data. It required a dedicated group to safeguard that knowledge, the elite scribes and priestly astronomers who became the living libraries of the ancient world. These priestly elites were the living hard drives of the ancient world, their minds the sole repositories for blueprints and star charts too valuable to be lost. In the dim light of a secluded temple, a young initiate in Egypt memorizes the precise angle for a pyramid shaft. At the same time, in a forest ashram in India, another student recites complex mathematical sutras. Across the ocean, a Mayan apprentice learns to track the cycles of Venus. These were not random acts of learning, but parts of a highly structured, global system of knowledge preservation. Anthropologists note that in an age before widespread literacy, oral tradition was not a primitive alternative to writing, but a sophisticated technology in itself. Complex information was encoded into stories, songs, and rhythmic verses, making it easier to memorize and transmit with incredible accuracy across generations. This method required immense discipline and a lifetime of dedicated training, often beginning in childhood. The knowledge itself was considered sacred, a powerful tool that required wisdom to wield, which justified its secrecy. This created a universal social structure, the priestly class, who served as the astronomers, architects, and healers of their societies. They were the bridge between the human and the divine, interpreting celestial omens and directing the construction of cities that mirrored the heavens. The training systems for these elites were strikingly similar across the globe. In ancient Greece, the mystery schools of Eleusis offered initiates profound spiritual experiences and insights into the nature of life and death. In India, the Guru Shishya Parampara, or the teacher-disciple tradition, involved a student living with a master for years, learning not just facts but an entire way of being through direct transmission. The Druids of Celtic Europe, as described by classical historians, underwent 20 years of training, memorizing countless verses of lore, history, and astronomy. They acted as judges, philosophers, and advisors to kings, holding immense sway because they controlled the flow of essential knowledge. Similarly, in the Inca Empire, the Amotas were the revered wise men, the professors of philosophy, astronomy, and history. They were responsible for educating the nobility and overseeing the construction of monumental works. This pattern of a centralized, educated class points to a potential shared template for managing advanced civilization. The initiation rites for these groups often involved symbolic death and rebirth, a universal metaphor for the transformative power of true knowledge. This shared structure of secretive, rigorous education suggests that the method for preserving and transferring this advanced understanding was as important as the information itself. What became of this intricate, global network of knowledge keepers? The evidence points not to a single cause, but to a slow unraveling, a great forgetting. Many of these cultures experienced periods of tremendous hardship, from prolonged droughts and food shortages to significant social upheaval. When a society's survival is threatened, the long-term preservation of abstract astronomical data or the secrets of acoustic resonance can become a secondary concern. The focus shifts to immediate needs. Furthermore, the very secrecy that protected this knowledge also made it vulnerable. If a lineage of druids or a school of amateurs was interrupted by conflict or illness, their unique repository of wisdom could vanish in a single generation. Oral traditions are resilient, but they are not infallible. They require a stable, continuous chain of teachers and students. A dramatic shift in climate, a volcanic eruption that darkens the skies for years, or the collapse of a trade route could sever these delicate chains of transmission. The centralized control of information, once a strength, became a critical weakness when those centers themselves fell into disarray. The network did not shatter all at once, but flickered out in different regions at different times, leaving behind silent stones and fragmented legends. This decline scattered humanity's collective memory, sending us into a long period where we had to slowly rediscover what was once known. The story of this collapse leads us to the final, haunting question: what concrete proof remains that this web of connection was ever more than a fascinating theory? The silence of the stones speaks of an abrupt and violent interruption. A layer of ash discovered in ice cores from Greenland, a sudden spike in oceanic temperatures recorded in deep-sea sediment. These are the geological scars of a planet in upheaval. Around 12,000 years ago, the Earth experienced a series of dramatic climatic shifts, a period known as the Younger Dryas, where temperatures plummeted and then soared again in a geological instant. This was not a gentle transition. It was a cataclysm that would have reshaped coastlines, transformed fertile plains into deserts, and shattered the foundations of any existing society. The archaeological record shows a strange pattern, a blank spot followed by the sudden, inexplicable emergence of advanced skills. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site dating to over 11,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers erected a complex of massive, T-shaped pillars carved with intricate animal reliefs, a feat of engineering and artistry that should not belong to its time according to conventional models. It stands as a monumental question mark, a structure that seems to have been built by people who already possessed a sophisticated knowledge of stone working and celestial alignment, yet left no evidence of a gradual development leading up to it. How do we explain this apparent leap? Catastrophist researchers like Graham Hancock propose a compelling narrative that a global network of advanced knowledge was fragmented by a Great Reset, a series of disasters that plunged the world into a dark age. The evidence is not only in the dirt but in our oldest stories. The tale of a great flood sent to cleanse the world is not unique to the Bible. It appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia, where the god E warns Utnapishtim to build a boat. It is central to the Popol Vuh of the Maya, which tells of a deluge brought by the heart of sky. The same story echoes in the legends of the Aboriginal peoples of Australia and the indigenous tribes of the Amazon. These are not mere coincidences of imagination. They are the cultural memories of a shared trauma, a global event so devastating it was seared into the collective human psyche. The theory suggests that small, isolated groups of survivors, the keepers of this old world knowledge, managed to persevere. They became the seeds from which new civilizations would sprout, carrying with them fragments of the original blueprint, the knowledge of pyramid construction, celestial navigation, and sacred geometry. This would explain why these advanced concepts appear fully formed in cultures like the Sumerians and the ancient Egyptians, as if gifted to them rather than developed through millennia of trial and error. The Great Reset provides a narrative for the Great Forgetting, a reason why the global web of connection faded into myth and our collective memory was fractured. If this knowledge was scattered like seeds on the wind, carried by fleeing survivors to new lands, then we should be able to find its traces not just in stone and story, but in the very words they spoke. The words for star and wheel echo across continents, their sounds and meanings tracing paths as clear as any map. When a linguist places the Sumerian word for king, Lugul, beside its counterpart in the Mayan language, Keyuhul Ajor, or Holy Lord, the resemblance seems more than chance. These are not isolated curiosities, but threads in a vast, fading tapestry of human speech. The study of ancient languages reveals a potential web of connection that mirrors the one we see in stone and star. Linguists have long proposed the existence of macro-families, vast ancestral tongues that splintered as humans migrated across the globe. One of the most debated proposals links the native languages of the Americas with those of Eurasia in a superfamily called Dean-Caucasian, suggesting a deep, prehistoric connection that defies our current timeline. The work of scholars like Joseph Greenberg, who grouped the myriad languages of the Americas into just 3 major families, remains controversial precisely because it points to a simpler, more interconnected past. We find specific, compelling examples in the shared vocabulary of technology and governance. The Dravidian languages of southern India and the ancient Elamite language of Iran share fundamental words, not just for basic concepts, but for advanced ideas, hinting at a shared cultural and technological milieu that stretched across the Persian Gulf. Across the Pacific, some researchers point to linguistic ties between Quechua, the language of the Inca, and languages in Southeast Asia, particularly in words for specific plants and agricultural techniques. The greatest prizes in this field are the undeciphered scripts, like Linguistic, are from the Minoan civilization. Each attempt to crack its code is a search for its relatives, a hope that it might be a bridge connecting the Aegean to the Indus Valley or beyond. While definitive proof is elusive and hotly contested, the cumulative weight of these phonetic and conceptual echoes is staggering. They suggest that the blueprints for pyramids and the formulas for pi did not travel alone. They were carried in the minds of people who had words for these things, people who spoke, traded, and taught. This web of words perfectly complements the architectural and scientific evidence, creating a chorus of connection. But if words and ideas traveled, so too did the people who carried them, leaving a biological signature we can now read in their very bones. The very blueprint of life now confirms these ancient pathways. Geneticists analyzing the bones of individuals who lived thousands of years ago are finding a story written in their DNA, a narrative of long journeys and unexpected meetings that our history books missed. This field, archaeogenetics, reads the human genome like a historical document, revealing migrations that could have carried entire libraries of knowledge across oceans. A compelling example is the sweet potato, a plant native to South America. For a long time, its presence across Polynesia was a botanical mystery. Now, genetic studies of both the plant and ancient human remains confirm a pre-Columbian connection, showing that Polynesian voyagers reached the shores of South America and returned home with this vital crop. This was not a one-way trip, it was an exchange. The geneticist David Reich and his team have analyzed ancient DNA from across the Americas, uncovering traces of a distant ancestry linked to populations in Australia and Melanesia, a signal of ancient voyages across the Pacific that are absent from the conventional archaeological record. These journeys are mapped in our very cells through specific genetic markers called haplogroups. Think of a haplogroup as a unique signature, a branch on the vast family tree of humanity that traces a specific lineage back to a common ancestor. The dispersal of these haplogroups creates a map of human movement. we can track the spread of one lineage from Siberia into the Americas and another from Southeast Asia deep into the islands of the Pacific. The crucial insight is that these genetic highways did not just carry people, they carried their worldviews. When these populations met, they exchanged more than just genes, they exchanged the very ideas that defined their cultures. The presence of a shared haplogroup in two distant locations often correlates with the shared use of a specific technology, like a particular method of boat building or a ceremonial practice, like the use of a certain musical instrument. The genetic evidence does not stand alone. It weaves seamlessly into the tapestry of cultural data, strengthening the case for a connected planet. These were not isolated genetic pools, but a flowing network of humanity, where the movement of people guaranteed the movement of knowledge. This genetic map finally gives us the living, breathing conduits through which the blueprints for pyramids, the secrets of metallurgy, and the cycles of celestial time could have traveled, carried by the very individuals whose descendants we are. The ambition to gather all the world's knowledge under one roof did not begin with the internet. It burned brightly in the Great Library of Alexandria, a legendary institution that sought to collect every known scroll, from the philosophical texts of Greece to the astronomical charts of Babylon and the medical treatises of India. This was not an isolated endeavor. It echoes in the vast University of Nalanda in India, where thousands of students from across Asia studied medicine, logic, and astronomy, and later in Baghdad's House of Wisdom, where scholars of various faiths collaborated to translate the world's knowledge into Arabic. These were not just libraries, they were the heirs to a much older tradition, the final, glorious flowering of that prehistoric network of shared knowledge. They became the new nodes in a continuing exchange, deliberately preserving and synthesizing the scattered sciences of the ancient world. Historians note that without the translation efforts at the House of Wisdom, key works of Greek thinkers like Aristotle and the mathematical innovations of Indian scholars might have been lost forever, severing a critical link in the chain of human discovery. The scholars who worked in these halls were the new knowledge keepers, translating algebra from Sanskrit, advancing optics with texts from Persia, and refining astronomical models with data from Egypt. Their collections were unimaginably vast, a physical manifestation of humanity's collective curiosity. Yet their stories are also cautionary tales. The burning of the Library of Alexandria stands as a permanent symbol of how fragile this interconnected knowledge can be. The destruction of Nalanda by invading armies and the eventual sacking of Baghdad scattered this carefully gathered wisdom to the winds, leading to another period of profound forgetting. These hubs teach us a vital lesson that the impulse to connect and share understanding is a powerful, recurring force in history, but it is also incredibly vulnerable. Their rise and fall show us that preserving knowledge is not a passive act. It is an active defense against a collective amnesia that has cost us centuries. This historical pattern of loss now fuels a modern, global effort to rediscover what was once known, using tools our ancestors could never have imagined. From the silence of forgotten libraries, we now turn to the eyes in the sky. A laser pulse fired from an aircraft sweeps over the dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest, and where the human eye sees only an unbroken sea of green, the data reveals the ghost of a sprawling metropolis. This is LiDAR, a technology that is stripping away the veil of time and vegetation, showing us an ancient world we never knew existed. Across the globe, satellite archaeology is performing similar miracles, identifying subtle changes in soil and plant growth that betray the presence of buried walls and roads. These are not mere tools, they are time machines, allowing researchers to see entire cities without moving a single shovelful of earth. The scale of what they are finding is forcing a complete rewrite of history. At Angkor Wat in Cambodia, these scans showed the city was not just a temple complex, but a vast, low-density urban center, the largest of its era on the planet. In North America, similar technologies have mapped the precise cosmological alignments of the Cahokia Mounds, revealing a sophistication in city planning that rivals the Old World. But perhaps the most stunning revelations are the connections. In the Andes, LIDAR has traced ancient road systems, the Quhapac Nyan, linking mountaintop citadels and coastal cities across thousands of miles, a network of integration that stuns modern engineers. In Central America, the jungle floor has given up its secrets, showing that the Maya civilization was a dense web of interconnected cities, farms, and fortifications, a landscape so intensely managed it challenges our very definition of urbanism. What does this new map tell us? It paints a picture of a world where distant cultures were not isolated islands of innovation, but nodes in a vast, humming network. The evidence is no longer just in the aligned stones we can touch, but in the digital shadows of cities we are only now learning to see. This rediscovered landscape, however, points to a civilization with a different relationship to the planet, one that understood its rhythms on a grand, almost unimaginable scale. A single textbook page cannot contain the map of this ancient world. The evidence we have explored does not simply add a footnote to history, it demands a complete rewrite of its central narrative. For centuries, the story of humanity's ascent has been told as one of isolated genius, of cultures blooming separately in their own fertile river valleys, cut off from one another by impassable mountains and trackless oceans. This conventional view is fundamentally Eurocentric, placing the Mediterranean and the Near East at the center of a linear march toward modernity, while other civilizations are treated as fascinating but ultimately separate curiosities. The pyramid in Egypt and the pyramid in Mexico were treated as unrelated phenomena, a coincidence of form rather than a clue to a deeper connection. This paradigm of isolation is now crumbling under the weight of new evidence. Mainstream academia, built upon generations of specialized, region-specific research, often resists this shift. The idea of transoceanic contact in deep antiquity challenges foundational assumptions and forces a painful but necessary re-examination of long-held doctrines. Revisionist historians like the late John Anthony West argued that we are not looking at the slow birth of civilization, but at its inheritance. They propose that the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge in Sumer and Egypt looks less like a beginning and more like a renaissance, a recovery of a much older, shared legacy. This resistance is natural, a hallmark of any scientific revolution where new data collides with established models. Yet the tide is turning, as genetic studies, LIDAR mapping, and comparative archaeology produce ever more compelling data. The isolated development model is becoming increasingly difficult to defend. The story of human innovation is being transformed from a series of isolated sparks into a single, spreading fire. The independent invention of writing in Mesopotamia, China, and Mesoamerica, once a cornerstone of the isolationist argument, is now being re-examined. Could the underlying concept of representing language with symbols have been a seed idea that traveled, adapting to different languages and cultures, rather than a miracle that occurred 3 separate times? This perspective does not diminish the genius of these cultures, but reframes it. It suggests that progress is rarely born in a vacuum. True leaps forward often come from the cross-pollination of ideas, from the collaboration between different ways of seeing the world. The ancient network was a global think tank where a breakthrough in Peruvian metallurgy could influence a technique in Southeast Asia, and where an astronomical observation made in Babylon could be verified and refined by a scholar in India. This re-evaluation is far more than an academic exercise. It changes how we understand our own potential. If our ancestors, with their simple boats and celestial maps, could maintain a web of knowledge that spanned the globe, what does that say about our ingrained capacity for connection and collaboration? Their example stands in stark contrast to the modern myth of the lone genius toiling in isolation. They achieved their greatest marvels not by hoarding knowledge, but by sharing it, by building a collective intelligence that was far greater than the sum of its parts. Reflecting on their world, we are left with a powerful and urgent question. In our own hyper-connected globalized age, with all our digital tools for communication, what might we achieve if we consciously chose to reactivate that ancient model of shared purpose and open exchange? The International Space Station orbits our planet as a shining testament to what we can accomplish together. It is a modern echo of that ancient network, a place where astronauts and scientists from rival nations share data and gaze at the stars with a unified purpose, just as those old celestial observers once did. This is the ultimate lesson left to us by our ancestors, that collaboration, not isolation, is the true engine of human progress. Their shared knowledge of astronomy and engineering allowed them to build civilizations, and our shared knowledge today allows us to reach beyond our world. The challenges we now face, from a changing global climate to the threat of worldwide health crises, are planetary in scale. They cannot be solved by any one nation working alone, only by a reactivation of that ancient collaborative spirit. Futurists point to this very idea, suggesting that our survival and our greatest leaps forward depend on our willingness to create a new global brain, a network of shared intelligence dedicated to the common good. We see this principle already at work in the open-source software movement, where programmers from every continent contribute code that anyone can use and improve, accelerating innovation in a way that closed, proprietary systems never could. International research collaborations, like the one that mapped the human genome, demonstrate how pooling resources and expertise can conquer problems that would stump even the most brilliant, isolated minds. The ancient world understood this intuitively. When one city mastered a technique for managing water in the desert, that knowledge became a lifeline for another city a continent away. Today, we are relearning that same lesson, sharing data on sustainable agriculture and renewable energy technologies across the globe, understanding that a breakthrough in one country can benefit all of humanity. This historical perspective offers a powerful corrective to the narrative of relentless competition. It shows us that our periods of greatest achievement have always been when we chose to connect, to share, and to build upon each other's discoveries. The silent stones of the past are not just monuments to forgotten gods, they are blueprints for a viable future. They urge us to look past artificial borders and short-term interests, to invest in global partnerships that protect our collective knowledge and our shared planet. How do we apply these lessons? We begin by consciously choosing collaboration, by supporting institutions that foster international exchange, and by recognizing that every piece of knowledge shared is a thread rewoven into that ancient, resilient web. The enduring mystery of our connected past is not merely a call to unravel history, but a call to action. It invites us to become the new knowledge keepers, to honor the legacy of our ancient predecessors by ensuring that our modern world does not forget the profound power of working together. Our journey across the ancient world reveals a single, undeniable truth, that humanity's first great achievements were born from connection. We have walked the silent avenues of Teotihuacan and gazed upon the celestial alignment of Giza. We have seen the same numbers, pi and phi, encoded in temples from India to the Americas, and heard the echo of the same symbols from the world tree to the feathered serpent, in myths separated by oceans. This is not a story of isolated genius, but of a shared inheritance, a global conversation in stone and star. The evidence compels us to discard the old map of a world where cultures developed in lonely silence. Instead, we see a vibrant tapestry woven with threads of exchanged knowledge, a prehistoric network where ideas flowed as freely as trade goods. This grand collaboration resulted in wonders that have endured for millennia, proving that when we share our brightest ideas, we build monuments that time itself struggles to erase. The lesson for us is both humbling and inspiring. Our ancestors, with their reed boats and celestial maps, achieved what we often struggle with today. They built bridges of understanding that spanned the entire planet. They understood that progress is not a solitary climb, but a collective ascent. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the free flow of knowledge, the willingness to learn from one another, is the true foundation upon which any great civilization is built. This story does not end in the past. It is an invitation to you. Look at the ancient world with these new eyes. See the pyramids not as separate tombs, but as chapters in the same book. See the shared calendars as pages from a universal language. I would love to hear which connection you find most compelling, so share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to continue this journey with us, subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries. The quest to uncover our shared past is far from over, and every new discovery reminds us of the incredible potential we hold when we choose